Well, it's great to be here for the Connecting Place. On today's edition, we are going to talk about the basics of toxic mold, some of the issues that come up when you're first addressing this very important issue. Maybe you're living in a home or working in an office or going to a school where you notice spots on the wall or ceiling, or you notice health issues, or a lot of people have respiratory problems. Whatever is going on that has brought you to this place to make this connection between health and environment, that's a good place. But often we don't know where to start. So on today's discussion, I have my husband, Chris, here. And welcome to the program.
Andrea. Yeah, I love what you've done with the place.
The Connecting Place? You like the Connect? Thank you.
It's the first time I've been here. I like what's on the wall and how clean everything is.
Thank you. Yeah, no mold here. Well, thank you for coming alongside, because Chris is going to follow along the chapters of the book, Is Your House Making You Sick? A Beginner's Guide to Toxic Mold, and kind of walk through some of these issues.
How can I determine if I have a problem? What are the first steps?
Well, you want to go intuitively first. Now, just as I mentioned before, if you notice that there are water leaks, or you know that there's a history of flooding, or you see spots on the carpet and you have health issues, that's a connection. So that's an intuitive connection. That doesn't mean that there was a test necessarily. You just know there's something off. That is your first step. Sometimes the symptoms are so severe and the issues are so extreme, and you suddenly realize this had a lot of flooding, this had this water damage from years ago, I'm out of here. And sometimes it's that simple or not so simple. It's never simple. But if you decide that I think there may be something going on, but I'm not sure, then your first step is to test the environment. Now, there are a lot of ways to do that. You can get those mold plates from the hardware store. Those are very cheap and inexpensive. However, those don't pull at the air. They're not going to tell you the species of mold. So I don't recommend those even as a first step. You can call a hygienist. Generally, they will do an air sample, or they do something called bulk sampling, where they do a lot of different tests. An air sample has its limitations because it's not measuring what's in the dust. And some of these types of molds don't go airborne easily, Stachybotrys and Chaetomium as examples. So your best first step often is a dust sample, because it carries more of the history of the home. It will tell you more about these types of mold that don't go easily airborne. There is no one test that is perfect. They all have limitations, so that's important to know.
Stepping back, though, we smelled in our home that we had the mold problem. We smelled this mildew smell every now and then when we walk past the room or go into the room, and we just dismissed it because we thought, well, it's just probably towels that have been, wet towels that have been left here. But trust your senses too, right?
Good question and good point to raise. That is, back to the intuitive one, we have been given the sense of smell, and you know it when you smell it. Sometimes you've been in the environment so long, you don't smell it anymore. But if someone else in the house says something smells musty, believe them. Don't necessarily, if they've been dumbed down for a lot of reasons where our sense is not working correctly, then listen to the person who says, that smells musty, and everybody knows what that smell is.
All right. What about if you see mold in the bathroom, where on the tile, that kind of thing, surface mold?
Surface mold can be, all mold is guilty until proven innocent. So while it works well in our justice system, innocent until proven guilty, it doesn't work that way with mold. You have to assume that it's worth investigating. It's not best to dismiss it. So sometimes surface mold just, because there's a lot of humidity in a bathroom, if the ventilation is not good, surface mold can be very innocent. What you want to be sure is that there's nothing behind that or some hidden issue that is causing this to protrude from the grout or the tile or the wall. If it simply is surface mold, there are a lot of remedies for that. But the number one myth about any mold is that bleach resolves the problem. It doesn't. It simply discolors it, and it can make a problem worse. So bleach is not, and there are lots of science, there's some science behind this in addition to just general knowledge of the fact that it doesn't actually kill the fungus. Now, it kills bacteria and virus. That's why we like bleach, but it's not really targeting the fungus. So there are a lot of natural solutions for that, such as tea tree oil, white vinegar, hydrogen peroxide, borax, and many others.
Is your house making you sick? It's a beginner's guide to toxic mold by Andrea Fabry. We're going through this as kind of an overview, just a flyover of the book. What if, and you get calls like this, our basement just flooded and we're freaking out. What do we do?
Well, I understand freaking out, and a lot of people are in this situation with the heavy rains that we get in certain parts of the country, the flash floods, and so forth. Absolutely. You want to be vigilant. The trick is quick action. And even, I have to say, the Environmental Protection Agency is on this. They get it, and they have very good documentation of what to do. So you can look that up, but just know that quick action is vital. Mold can grow. Within 24 to 48 hours, you can get a toxic situation going. So there are all sorts of details to this when it comes down to the possessions, but the first goal is to dry it out. And that can be with a dehumidifier, with fans, ventilation, open everything up. Darkness is not good. Tight situations, tight air situations where there's not ventilation, that breeds these type of microbes. So quick action is very important.
All right, so I know I have a mold situation in my house, and I want to fix it. How do I safely remediate? And what in the world does that word mean?
Well, remediation means to, correct the situation, to get in there and take care of the situation. There are a lot of horror stories about that. Actually, our family has a horror story about improper remediation. So there are a lot of questions to ask before you hire someone to fix it. Now, I know there are fix-it people listening who say, I can do this myself. It's possible you can, depending on the situation. If it is a very isolated situation and people are healthy in the home and you know where it is and you want to cut this out safely and bag it up and take it outside and then, remodel, great, if that's you. Some of these severe situations, to do it yourself is not a good idea. Now, who do I find that understands this? You need a qualified remediation company. So there are a lot of questions to ask before you would hire somebody, including, do you believe mold is harmful? Now, that seems like a basic question, but we had a remediator who said, this stuff is don't listen to all those scare things. It's nothing. And we believed him. And you don't need insurance he wasn't insured or bonded. You don't need that. It's going to be fine. He said what we wanted to hear because he was cheaper. So it's better to pay for the quality and making sure they're licensed and insured. And they believe mold is hazardous. That being said, you want to be sure their practices are very, very detailed. And we go into this in the book. Thankfully, there is a site that you can link to that outlines a very healthy and safe remediation plan. But the bottom line involves containing the area, making sure there's negative air pressure, air going outdoors. You don't want this to circulate inside. You want the vents covered. Well, there's so many details to it, but basically it contained in plastic sheeting so that it's not going to spread throughout the home. The last thing you want are some of these spores and mycotoxins and all the goo that goes with a toxic mold situation to go into the vents and throughout the house. That's when you have a problem.
What about somebody who comes along and says, I've got this magic box, or you can heat your house up or cool your house down and it'll get rid of all of this kind of stuff, kind of the magic pill?
Well, it's always the trick is this is like trying to treat something in the body that is causing you problems. It's better to remove it, even if it's a benign tumor sometimes. Even if it's a benign tumor sometimes. But the bottom line is this mold needs to be removed, not just treated and the air treated. Now, can some of these situations make it better? Yes. And there is some discussion about ozone being a treatment. The EPA recommends against that. I know that Dr. Jack Thrasher, a leading toxicologist, also recommends against that. Boxes, ozone boxes can be good for possessions, but not necessarily to do a whole house. And definitely if that's done, you should be away from the house and let that ventilate properly before you return.
I've heard people talk about cross-contamination, and that means when you have a mold situation in your house, you know that the contents, your clothes and your furniture, it's got this mold stuff on it. How do I know if I need to just leave all that behind?
Well, that's a severe situation. So again, I want to rest assured not every situation is extreme. But there are those, and I have spoken with many families over the years where it gets to this point where everyone is extremely, or at least 1 to 2 members of the family have a lot of symptoms. You don't want to take this problem with you when you move. This is overwhelming. We have a lot of stuff in our lives now. It's not as simple as it once was when we had tents and we kind of moved around, right? So this is not to say, oh, well, you can't bring anything with you, toss it. That's too extreme. There are certain things you can clean and take with you, but things like clothing and books are very, very difficult to clean. These spores are microscopic. And even non-viable spores, which aren't capable of reproducing, that cells breaking release toxins. You can bring the problem with you. So far better to be over the top cautious when it comes to your possessions if you are deciding to move away from a mold situation that is severe. I recommend renting a storage unit if you feel like I'm not ready to make this decision. Now, we were advised to treat our home like a fire. That helped. And honestly, it's so much easier. And nobody wants a fire, but you don't have time to make these decisions. You just run for your life and you get your loved ones out and maybe your pictures or your pets. So treat it like a fire when the situation is extreme, if possible. And you'll know that if that's the case. If that's not possible, rent a storage unit and keep what you must keep and rent the storage unit. And then as you get to a safe place, a safe home, then you make your decisions later. Certain things like dishes and ceramics and non-porous items are more easily cleaned than even computers have fans, and that can blow things through the house. So this is it's one of the most difficult issues, and sometimes it's just better addressed later. That's why I recommend storing, and then you can think about it when you have a clear head.
You mentioned, just for our listeners, that we were living in tents. You weren't talking about us, you and me, living in a tent. You're talking about in antiquity, right?
Yes, many years ago, our lives were, or caves for that matter.
Yeah.
No, this wasn't us, but we just didn't have the space, and we as the nomadic period of our time.
I gotcha. I know what you're talking about. Andrea Fabry. This is the connecting place. And so let's connect about medical testing. A lot of people are having some of the symptoms, perhaps from an environmental thing, a mold thing that's going on in their house. What kind of testing? You get questions about this all the time.
Well, first of all, it's hard to find a doctor who knows and understands environmental illness. And, there isn't a lot of training in that area in our medical schools. So understand that they don't have the training and don't necessarily even believe this is an issue. We're in a very prescriptive, conventional medical scenario right now, at this period in our history. It's changing. Functional medical doctors tend to understand some of this a little bit better. There's associations of environmental medicine. There are doctors out there who acknowledge this connection. But even if they don't, and some of these lab tests to order, I would recommend that. But know that you are your best advocate. And sometimes we know our bodies, and what they need intuitively. And so do not hesitate to fight for yourself and stand up for yourself and be confident that I've been injured by an environment and I'd like to know more about this. Because unfortunately, there aren't a lot of mold specialists around the country, but they are there, and several of the websites that we list on my blog and in the book and other areas will lead you to some of these specialists. But a few of the tests might be the C4A, which is an inflammatory marker. And so if that's high, then your body's inflamed, although you may already know that. MSH, which is a hormone measurement, it's a critical part of the immune system. It's often low for those injured by mold. The VEGF, it's a long name, but it stimulates new blood vessel formation. It's often low in those exposed to toxic mold. There's a vision test online. There's genetic testing, an HLA test, which will show you, am I predisposed to have a hard time detoxing this type of exposure, these types of toxins? That can be helpful as well. But I always want to go back to understanding, the intuitive nature of this. If I've had a lot of mold in my home and I'm sick, you can just know that those two are related.
And it's interesting in your story, our story, medical doctors as well as professionals who wanted to clean the house both said, nah, that can't do it. That's not related. What's going on with your kids and with you? Nah, that can't do that. Mold can't do that.
And I encourage you to stay strong with that. And again, I have a lot of grace and understanding, and to a point, there's a lot of psychological things going on. There's trauma. This is a very complex issue. But to be dismissed and to accept that, I would encourage you not to do that. No, environmental illness is very real. We are surrounded. This is unprecedented, and what we have been exposing our kids to in ways of chemicals and even the electromagnetic environment that we live in is impacting our health. There's a lot of stress on our immune systems, and our immune systems will manifest this in a lot of different ways. Be confident the environment matters.
Can you recover then? Let's say you look for this, you find it, you know that all of these things, you tested yourself. How do you detox?
Well, there's no one magic pill on this either, just as there's no one magic pill to fix a home. And once you understand and embrace that, I think you're in for a better experience as you travel this road. The detox process is very real. The body, as it gets rid of some of this, sometimes your symptoms can be worse. Things can be worse before they get better. That's very normal. There's something called a healing crisis that is welcomed in some ways, but then you have to kind of watch. I don't want too much, or my system gets overwhelmed. Just know that this is not easy, but yes, I can say from experience, we're better than we were 8 years ago than when we were living in the home. Is everything all fixed, or was it easy? No. Sometimes for different people respond differently to different treatments. So I don't advocate for one particular way of getting rid of this and going through this process. There are some basics, though, of getting outdoors, sunshine, how much sun, but just being outdoors, being in the shade, rest, good diet. What type of diet? Well, there's the antifungal diets. Well, there are a lot of those, but it's safe to say a lot of sugar in the diet will disrupt the body and the immune system. And certainly when we're colonized by some of these mold toxins, the fungus will these microbes feed off of sugar. That's how they grow. Same in the house. The cellulose is the sugar for the mold if it has water, and we have water in our bodies. So a lot of this just makes sense. Good common sense, but don't give up and try not to put a timeline on this process. Our bodies are amazing. They want to get better. Just embrace the process.
What happens if you know there's a problem, but somebody in your family, let's say your spouse, there's pushback about this because of the financial stuff, or they don't believe you, or you and your spouse are together on this, but the extended family is just, you guys are crazy.
Well, this is a future Connecting Place broadcast. There's no doubt, because this is the most common thing I hear, and I feel so badly every time for how isolating this journey is. And of course, from where I sit, after 8 years and more of talking to hundreds of families, I assure you, you're not alone, nor are you crazy. That environment matters when it comes to your health. This is the most basic concept that can be. But we are so often dismissed, and I understand. I've been on the other side. I would have dismissed this before this happened to us. I didn't understand why anyone wouldn't even thought about any type of environmental triggers or got rid of the chemicals in their home. I just dismissed the whole thing until someone said to me, "Do you think it's your house that's making you guys so sick?" And that's why I named this book that. That question changed my life. So you are raising a question for those around you who don't understand. Now, when it's in your immediate family and you're trying to decide this together, it's like, I think this house is making us sick. When the spouse says, well, I don't. I don't have an easy answer for that. And certainly we'll share more of our story at a later point, because I was certainly the driving force in making this connection. But Chris came alongside of me, and I'm so grateful for that. But I would say those in our extended family kind of just, they were bewildered by us and very dismissive of it. And you know what? Okay, you just keep going. Don't invest a lot of energy trying to convince other people when it's in your immediate family and you need to make a decision together. That's the beauty of the internet. There are a lot of scientific studies showing a connection between mold exposure and illness. The information is out there. You have to be selective, and I know it's very overwhelming, but just be confident. Don't give up, and respect those around you for the fact that they don't understand. They don't understand, and I hope they don't have to in some ways, because this is a very hard journey. But there are ways to just keep going.
In some ways, you have to live it in order to understand it, and you wouldn't wish that on your worst enemy in some ways. Okay, so you have this loss of possessions, loss of a house. The insurance company doesn't come alongside you. What about legal recourse? Do I sue?
Well, I have a lot of information on this. Not a lot, because there isn't a lot. There is no federal standard for this. So this is a very tough battle. But things are changing, and I have seen some successful lawsuits when it comes to getting compensated for the loss of their home, getting disability, acknowledgement, remedy, some successful lawsuits against landlords, remediators. There are laws in place in some states requiring remediators to be certified. There's hope in this area. And if that's the direction you feel compelled to go, then I hope that some of these resources will help you. Let me just mention here, though, you have to weigh the cost of legal action. Even if it's successful, it can be extremely draining of resources and your energy and your health. So, and we did try the legal avenue. It didn't work for us. Our builder was not covered. His insurance policy had a loophole for this. It just was never going to work. We tried, and I found it to be extremely draining. I'm glad I tried, so I can say firsthand that for us, I felt much freer when we let it go. Do you want to interject on that?
Well, yeah, and I agree. You only have so much energy in order. What is your main goal here? Is your main goal to recoup the money that you've lost over all these things, or is it to go for your health? And a lot of people would say, well, I want both. And that's okay. If you can do both, great. But I remember going through the depositions and trying to figure out how do we, encapsulate this, and getting all of the doctors and the medical records and all that kind of stuff. And it just left me with no energy to do the work that I had to do, let alone try to get better with this. So I agree with you on what you say about counting the cost. What about the next place you live then? Because you're going to be traumatized if you've gone through this and you figure out, well, but this next place, we're going to have mold there too.
Well, again, I go back to intuition. Now, for our house that had the extreme mold exposure and the faulty workmanship and the shortcuts taken in the home, when I first walked into that home, I didn't ever want to go back. I said to Chris, this is dark. There's something, I don't like it. I knew nothing about mold. I knew nothing about health. I knew nothing. Except I look back and go, well, there was an instinct there. And I believe that women have this unique gift of shelter and nurture. And, we just have a sense, and not that men don't, but men often have this gift of providing. And so everybody comes at this, as a couple, different ways. But trust the instinct in terms of the shelter and the nurturing part of you, number one. Now, with your knowledge, you will look at a house much differently. And so a lot of times this just takes care of itself, but you can go back to your dust sampling. You can go back to thermal imaging if you want to see behind the walls and make sure that everything's dry in this home. There are things to look for in terms of slope of the land. And, you don't trust necessarily an inspector who may not know anything about looking for toxic mold. You want to find out if there's a history of water damage. You want to have as much knowledge as you can about this home as possible before you make a decision. I understand it's daunting, but your knowledge will work for you.
There's an appendix of the entire story that we went through in the end of the book, but the 11th chapter is Hope After Mold. Is there life after you've had an exposure like this?
And absolutely, and I want to leave on this note. No matter what situation you find, maybe it's a very simple mold situation that's easily remedied, or you've been through the ringer. Wherever you are, there is hope when it comes to life after this. Understand it's a process. It takes time, and just take the next step. Whatever your next step is, don't give up. That's the one promise I made to myself and to my family. They needed a mom. I was trying my best. I was overwhelmed. I had many days where I just didn't feel like I could get through the next hour. But I knew I wouldn't give up. And that's the pledge I made to myself. Now, that's the promise I could make my family. I couldn't promise that we were going to get better or everything's going to work out. I couldn't. I just knew I won't give up on this. And I would encourage you to do the same.
Congratulations, Andrea. Your dad wrote you after he had read this book, and he said something like, I can't believe how much time it must have taken you to pull all of this together, because there's some great information here, some statistical information, medical information, all of that, but there's also your heart coming through. So congratulations on putting this together in a readable form, and I think it's going to be something that'll help a lot of people.
Thank you so much, and thank you for listening today to The Connecting Place.